Whether we're conscious of it or not, we're always emanating some sort of state.
This state is a combination of the electromagnetic output from our brain waves, and they measure that with an EEG, and our heart waves measured with an EKG.
So this state is felt and adapted to by the mirror neurons in those around us and through other mechanisms that quantum physicists and biologists are actively exploring.
So the question is, are we willing to personally create and maintain a state of inclusion that provides our people with the type of communication, tone, and feeling that best facilitates them to access their genius?
If so, congratulations are in order, because we are practicing one of the essential elements for creating a thriving culture in business and life.
So, this completes our tour through the 7 components here in Phase 1. Now we're ready for Phase 2, Imagine It.
We've introduced some great material on the process of inclusion in Phase 1. Now let's really ground it with a simulation so you can experience this process in action.
Before we initiate this, let's take a couple of minutes to create a resource for your trial run. And by the way, remember to download the Inclusion Continuum worksheet and print it out. It's great guidance as you practice throughout the week.
And as always, you'll have our 2 audio programs for daily support and action. So let's walk through first an imaginary scenario so you get a sense of this practice.
By the way, your game challenge is to consciously include people you've previously overlooked or even avoided in meetings, assessments, or conversations.
Okay, so here's an example. Let's say the situation is this person is saying, hey, I already have a great go-to group of people I collaborate with.
And their old story, I don't need to include anyone else. My group already provides me with diverse perspectives.
Their payoff might be, you know what, I get to stay in my comfort zone while showing that I'm inclusive because I involve other people.
And here's the turnaround, a thriving realization. I'm leaving some people out of the decision-making process, including people who will be tasked to implement whatever process the leadership team decides upon.
This is where you, as a thriving, inclusive leader, come to realize that it's an important part of your job to actively engage a broad constituency.
Right. I mean, you want to inform your decisions, stimulate the genius of the group, and really engage your people more fully by providing them with meaningful involvement, really the increased sense of ownership in what you decide together.
Right, and so your upgrading inclusionary process might go something like this. I'll invite my go-to people to join me in reaching out to develop a broader, more representative group of people.
Okay, well, that gives you one example of how to do this in practice. And, you know, like all of these practices, it ends up being pretty simple and straightforward. In this case, you are intentionally creating a process of inclusion as you go throughout this next week.
Now, you may find doubts coming up like, what? I'm supposed to ask everyone about everything?
That's not the case. We said that earlier. Inclusion is strategic. That's the thing to remember. Inclusion is strategic. You think of who has a unique perspective, say a particular influence with key groups, and or who will be involved in implementing a process, also who will be affected by the outcome.
So involving the right people early on and then throughout the process will increase buy-in and actually save time and money in the long run.
Of course, an important part of this inclusion process is you need to keep people in the loop as you go along so they know how their feedback informed or impacted the decisions.
Yeah, we call that closing the loop. All right then, let's begin your simulation, and remember your game challenge this week is to consciously include people you have previously overlooked or avoided in meetings, assessments, or conversations.
As mentioned earlier, we detailed this whole process on the Inclusion Continuum worksheet. So we hope you've downloaded it, printed it out. It's it's very handy as a reference.
All right, so let's start with your situation. Pick one situation at work or in your personal life where you and others could benefit by you involving a broader group of people in a project, a strategy session, a planning process, or a decision.
So as with all of these simulations, pick something that's manageable and also has a challenging element to it, and you also want to feel that you've earned it.
All right, number 2, you're going to use the inclusion continuum. As you consider that inclusion continuum relative to the situation you've selected, ask yourself these questions. Who often gets overlooked?
Who might bring a unique and valuable perspective to a decision-making process?
Whose voice is missing from creative or design discussions?
Who is it that disagrees with your point of view but needs to be heard to ensure that you're paying attention to the other sides of the story?
All right, now, number 3, identify your past payoff. Get clear on why you haven't involved such people in the past, right?
It's usually quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean, has it made it easier for you? Are you unsure of how to manage their differences? Have biases maybe influenced your thinking?
So here's the point where you make a commitment to improve. Being a thriving leader means always being committed to improving and growing.
Right.
So pledge to yourself that you're going to become an expert at mining the genius of those around you.
Well, inclusion can be a tough challenge. So even if you involve one additional person in a process or decision this coming week, you'll be taking a significant step forward.
Yeah, I mean, even if it's just one person.
Yeah.
So number 5, imagine being more inclusive. So you already know the power of story and the power of using your imagination to visualize the results you want. So take a moment right now. See yourself reaching out to one person, perhaps more, but imagine inviting them to share their feedback or ideas. Maybe it's as simple as just asking them for their opinion.
In your mind's eye, see them engaging with you as you model being fully present with them, in deep time with them, right? Listening with real interest.
See yourself thanking them for offering their ideas. See them smiling, grateful to have been included. And let yourself soak in this feeling of their appreciation and your gratitude for learning something valuable.
All right, now, step number 6, choose a partner to help you engage in this practice.
As you know by now, we really do advocate having a partner or buddy, helps you form new habits, the new neural pathways. We really do think it's essential.
Think of who to call on for this challenge. I mean, this step itself could actually be an act of inclusion and give you the chance to use somebody else that maybe you haven't utilized before.
Right. So this completes phase 2, and let's shift into phase 3. And we'll do a little troubleshooting in advance to kind of head off a few problems that could develop. The first one being pretty simple: what if people don't want to be involved?
It happens, it does happen. And obviously you don't want to force people, but learning to make artful invitations is part of mastering this practice.
I got to interject with my little story here about the Boy Scout. We tell this story in the book. He comes back to headquarters, he's all beaten up, and Scoutmaster says, "What happened to you?" He says, "Well, I helped an old lady across the street." "Well, yeah, but why are you beaten up like that?" And he said, "Well, she didn't want to go." So include the people who want to be included.
Right. I mean, if their time is limited, you could maybe ask them one key question. Ask if you could check in with them from time to time to get their perspective on other issues or other situations.
Yeah, the main thing you're doing here is increasing the range of available intelligence. You're creating buy-in. Even if people turn you down, and some probably will, at least they know you sought out their opinion or input.
Another question you could have come up is, well, what if people want to get too involved?
Right. So you've got to be clear up front about the extent of involvement you're inviting. I mean, especially if you don't know someone well, or if they've been challenging for you in the past, it's smart to start out with a short, maybe a 5-minute meeting to gather some ideas or feedback from them.
Remember, you're taking this one step at a time and setting yourself and others up to win.
So what happens if you get too much input? And, this can happen, especially when you're first learning the process.
But part of getting useful input is to be clear with what problem you're looking to solve or what you're hoping to accomplish.
And it's just as important to collect ideas and input. I mean, you can make notes, you can let the feedback soak into your subconscious. Actually, it's amazing
Yeah.
how our mind processes, synthesizes information really on its own, as long as we give it some time to marinate.
Well, so another what-if question could come up is, well, what if we make decisions that are not in line with people's ideas or recommendations?
You know that happens. It's unavoidable at times. The key here is to have kept people in the loop enough they know you seriously considered their input.
Yeah, share their perspectives and considerations of others along the way wherever possible.
Yeah, we mentioned this a moment ago. We called it closing the communication loop.
Yeah, it really allows people to know that their feedback was valuable in the process of you arriving at whatever decision you arrived at.
Okay, so you're almost ready to go live with your challenge. A couple of thoughts to remember as we keep on emphasizing, use the buddy system.
It's ideal for this week's practice because, as we said, it is in and of itself an act of inclusion.
Right, and as you practice through this week, pay particular attention to who's being overlooked, who's not being heard or valued.
And step in wherever possible to model inclusion. When you do so, you'll find that accomplishing this specific challenge will start to feel increasingly natural.
And as a reminder, your game challenge is to consciously include people in meetings, assessments, and conversations that you've previously overlooked or avoided.
And as with every module, to help you really integrate the thriving practices from this module, we always provide you with 2 brief audio programs to help you better, in this case, leverage the genius of inclusion.
So have fun with this challenge. It's a meaty one. And remember, we're at our best when we elevate our actions to a level of productive play. And this is your story, after all.
So, using the practices you've already begun to master, especially writing a new story, putting vision first, and experiencing results now, you can make all of this week's challenge easier and more enjoyable.
So, we look forward to working with you again in the next module and engage with the practice of mastering quantum responsibility. See you there.
For more information about this module, you can refer to our book, The 12 Essential Practices for Thriving in Business and Life.